Begin audio log. As the first snowflake descended from the sky, it was as if the whole town of Lancaster held its breath. The weather forecast had been hinting at it for weeks, but there's something surreal about seeing those delicate crystals finally materialize, dancing in the crisp winter air. Lancaster County, known for its resilience and preparedness, wasn't caught off guard by the cold front. After all, this was Pennsylvania's bright spot, where communities were accustomed to weathering the harshest of winters with steadfast resolve. People went about their daily routines, the snow adding a picturesque charm to the familiar streets and countryside. Children bundled up in thick coats and scarves eagerly dashed outside, their laughter echoing against the backdrop of white. Parents watched from cozy porches, sipping steaming mugs of cocoa, their breath forming clouds in the frosty air. The air was filled with a palpable excitement as students poured out of Penn Manor High School, their laughter mingling with the soft crunch of freshly fallen snow underfoot. Winter break had officially begun, and the promise of days filled with sledding, snowball fights, and cozy evenings by the fireplace hung in the air like a tantalizing dream. I remember that day vividly, the way the sun glinted off the pristine white landscape, casting a magical glow over everything it touched. My friends and I laughed and joked as we trudged through the snow, making plans for the days ahead. We were invincible, it seemed, ready to conquer whatever adventures winter had in store for us. But even in the midst of our youthful exuberance, there was a hint of something darker lurking at the edges of our consciousness. A chill wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that we couldn't quite shake. It was as if the very air itself was trying to warn us of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Millersville, Pennsylvania, nestled amidst the picturesque landscape of Lancaster County, was a town steeped in education and tradition. As the snow continued to blanket the town, it transformed into a winter wonderland straight out of a postcard. Eshelman Elementary School stood proudly at the heart of the town, its cheerful facade a beacon of learning and childhood innocence. Children bounded out of its doors, their faces flushed with excitement at the prospect of snow days and holiday festivities. Millersville University, with its sprawling campus and stately buildings, loomed in the distance, a symbol of higher education and academic excellence. Despite the chill in the air, students bustled to and from classes, their minds buzzing with the promise of future success. On the border of town, Elizabeth R. Martin School provided a nurturing environment for the youngest members of the community, its halls echoing with the laughter and chatter of eager learners. Meanwhile, Manor Middle School stood as a bridge between childhood and adolescence, its students navigating the complexities of growing up amidst the backdrop of swirling snowflakes and fleeting innocence. The snowfall persisted, relentless in its intensity, blanketing Millersville in a thick layer of white. It was as if the heavens themselves had opened up, unleashing a tempest of snow and ice upon the unsuspecting town. Northeast whiteouts were rare in the region, the last one dating back to the infamous blizzard of 1993, but this storm was different. It seemed determined to defy all expectations, raging on with a ferocity that sent shivers down the spines of even the hardiest residents. But despite the severity of the weather, Millersville was better equipped than ever to handle such a crisis. In the years since the blizzard of '93, advancements in technology and infrastructure had revolutionized the town's approach to snow removal and disaster management. Plows rumbled through the streets, their flashing lights cutting through the swirling snowflakes as they worked tirelessly to keep the roads clear. Salt trucks followed closely behind, spreading their icy payload in a desperate bid to keep the slick roads from becoming treacherous death traps. Meanwhile, emergency shelters were hastily set up throughout the town, offering refuge to those stranded by the storm. Community centers, schools, and churches opened their doors to the weary travelers, providing warmth, food, and shelter from the unforgiving cold. As the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, the snow showed no signs of relenting. What had started as a novelty, a rare and unexpected winter wonderland, had transformed into a relentless siege upon the town of Millersville. 3 days turned into a week, 1 week into 2 weeks, and before anyone knew it, an entire month had passed since the storm first began its onslaught. At first, the residents of Millersville had maintained a sense of optimism, clinging to the hope that the snow would soon melt away and life would return to normal. But as the days dragged on and the snow continued to fall unabated, that optimism began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of dread and uncertainty. It wasn't until that first full month had passed that the gravity of the situation truly began to sink in. Roads that had once been bustling thoroughfares were now buried beneath towering drifts of snow, rendering them impassable to all but the most determined travelers. Power lines sagged under the weight of ice and snow, leaving entire neighborhoods shrouded in darkness and cold. And despite the best efforts of emergency responders and volunteers, the town's resources were stretched to their breaking point, struggling to keep pace with the ever-worsening conditions. The winter storm that had descended upon Millersville continued to grow, its icy grip tightening around the entire northeastern United States and a substantial portion of Canada. What had begun as a localized event had now escalated into a full-blown meteorological catastrophe, plunging the region into a state of perpetual winter hell. From the bustling streets of New York City to the remote wilderness of the Canadian Rockies, no corner of the affected area was spared from the storm's wrath. Cities ground to a halt as snow piled high in the streets, burying cars and buildings alike beneath its icy embrace. Power outages became commonplace, leaving millions without heat or electricity in the dead of winter. But despite the chaos and devastation, the people of the Northeast refused to surrender to despair. Communities banded together, pooling their resources and ingenuity to weather the storm's onslaught. Emergency shelters sprang up in every town and city, providing refuge to those in need. Food and supplies were rationed carefully, with neighbors looking out for one another in a display of solidarity and resilience. With the situation growing increasingly dire, all branches of the military were mobilized to provide aid and support to the beleaguered communities of the Northeast. From the skies above to the icy waters below, the full might of the armed forces was brought to bear in a desperate bid to alleviate the suffering caused by the relentless winter storm. The Air Force took to the skies, their cargo planes laden with supplies destined for the snowbound towns and cities below. From blankets and food rations to medical supplies and generators, every resource at their disposal was marshaled to ensure that no one was left wanting in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, the Navy set sail for the icy waters off the coast, their ships braving the treacherous conditions to deliver much-needed relief to coastal communities cut off from the outside world. Helicopters buzzed overhead, airlifting stranded residents to safety and ferrying supplies to isolated areas inaccessible by land. On the frozen rivers and ports, the Coast Guard worked tirelessly to break through the thick ice that threatened to choke off vital supply lines. Icebreakers plowed through the frozen waters, their powerful engines roaring as they cleared a path for ships laden with food, fuel, and other essential goods. And on the ground, the Army deployed its troops to assist with snow removal efforts, their heavy machinery roaring to life as they worked to clear roads and highways buried beneath the snowdrifts. Soldiers braved the biting cold and blinding snow, their determination unwavering as they labored to ensure that help reached those who needed it most. Together, the men and women of the military stood as a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm, their unwavering commitment to duty and service serving as a shining example of the best that humanity had to offer in the face of adversity. And as they worked tirelessly to bring relief to the snowbound communities of the Northeast, they reminded us all that even in our darkest hour, we are never truly alone. After what felt like an eternity of unyielding snowfall, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. One day, a break in the clouds allowed a sliver of sunlight to filter through, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered landscape. It was a moment of respite, a brief reprieve from the relentless onslaught of winter. As the days turned into weeks, the storm began to lose its ferocity, its once mighty grip on the region slowly loosening. The snowfall became less frequent, the winds less biting, as if nature itself was finally relenting after months of relentless fury. People emerged from their homes cautiously, blinking in the unfamiliar sunlight as they ventured outside to survey the damage wrought by the storm. Buildings stood battered but resilient, their walls scarred by the icy onslaught. Roads lay buried beneath mountains of snow, their surfaces slick and treacherous. But despite the devastation, there was a sense of hope in the air, a feeling that the worst was finally behind them. The long northeast winter was wrapping up, its icy grip loosening as the days grew longer and the temperatures began to rise. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal in the snowbound towns and cities of the Northeast. Streets were cleared, power lines repaired, and communities came together to rebuild in the wake of the storm's destruction. And as the last vestiges of winter melted away, a sense of triumph washed over the region, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The long northeast winter had finally come to an end, leaving behind a legacy of hardship and perseverance that would be remembered for generations to come. As the last remnants of snow melted away, a wave of rejuvenation swept over the Northeast, signaling the arrival of spring in all its glory. The once frozen landscape thawed, revealing the vibrant hues of new life bursting forth from the earth. Budding trees unfurled their delicate leaves, painting the horizon in shades of green as far as the eye could see. Flowers bloomed in riotous displays of color, their petals drinking in the warm sunlight and filling the air with their sweet fragrance. Birds returned from their winter migrations, filling the air with their melodic songs as they built nests and started families in the newly awakened forest. Squirrels and chipmunks scurried about, collecting food and frolicking in the newfound warmth. People emerged from their winter hibernation, shedding their heavy coats and scarves in favor of lighter attire as they ventured outside to bask in the newfound warmth of the sun. Parks and playgrounds once again echoed with the joyful laughter of children at play, their carefree exuberance a testament to the resilience of youth. But then, the first reports trickled in like whispers of a dark secret, murmurs of something sinister lurking beneath the surface of the newfound springtime tranquility. It began innocuously enough, with rumors of graves disturbed and bodies gone missing from the local graveyard. At first, the townsfolk dismissed it as the work of grave robbers, a macabre but all too familiar occurrence in the annals of history. But as the reports multiplied and the scope of the phenomenon became apparent, unease spread through the community like wildfire. Families who had come to pay their respects to lost loved ones found only empty plots, the earth disturbed and the coffins missing. Cemetery caretakers scratched their heads in bewilderment, unable to explain the inexplicable disappearances that seemed to defy all rational explanation. Speculation ran rampant, fueled by fear and uncertainty. Some whispered of dark rituals and occult practices, while others pointed fingers at more earthly explanations, citing the possibility of theft or vandalism gone awry. But regardless of the theories that abounded, one fact remained undeniable: several bodies from the graveyard had indeed gone missing, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread that threatened to engulf the entire town in its icy grip. And as the days passed and the mystery deepened, it became increasingly clear that something far more sinister than mere grave robbers was at work in the once peaceful streets of Millersville. The unsettling reports of missing bodies from graveyards in Millersville were soon overshadowed by a wave of similar incidents occurring across the state. What had initially seemed like an isolated occurrence now revealed itself to be part of a much larger and more sinister pattern. From Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, from Scranton to Erie, graveyards became scenes of confusion and horror as families discovered empty plots where their loved ones had been laid to rest. Cemetery caretakers and local authorities scrambled to make sense of the inexplicable disappearances, but their efforts yielded only more questions and mounting frustration. With each passing day, the number of missing bodies grew, leaving communities gripped by fear and uncertainty. Rumors swirled, fueled by speculation and superstition, as people struggled to comprehend the inexplicable phenomenon unfolding before their eyes. Some whispered of dark forces at work, invoking tales of restless spirits and vengeful ghosts rising from their graves in search of revenge. Others pointed fingers at more earthly explanations, suggesting the involvement of criminal syndicates or even government conspiracies. As the disappearances continued unabated, law enforcement agencies across the state launched a massive investigative effort to unravel the mystery of the missing bodies. From local police departments to state and federal agencies, officers and detectives worked tirelessly to sift through the evidence and follow every lead in search of answers. Teams of forensic experts descended upon the affected graveyards, meticulously combing through the disturbed earth and examining every clue in painstaking detail. Ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs were brought in to aid in the search, their keen senses honed to detect even the faintest traces of human remains. But despite their best efforts, the investigators found themselves stymied at every turn. The evidence they uncovered only deepened the mystery, raising more questions than answers. There were no signs of forced entry or vandalism at the grave sites, no footprints or tire tracks to suggest foul play. It was as if the bodies had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind no trace of their existence. As days turned into weeks and the investigation dragged on, frustration and desperation began to set in. The media descended upon the scene, eager to capitalize on the sensational story unfolding before their eyes. Speculation ran rampant, with conspiracy theories and wild rumors spreading like wildfire through the public consciousness. As the mystery of the missing bodies deepened, a new and even more chilling phenomenon began to unfold across the state. People were disappearing without a trace, vanishing into thin air in the darkest of nights and the brightest of days. The disappearances struck without warning, with individuals from all walks of life suddenly and inexplicably vanishing from their homes, their workplaces, and even the crowded streets of bustling cities. There was no pattern, no rhyme or reason to the disappearances, leaving communities gripped by fear and paranoia. Law enforcement agencies scrambled to respond to the growing crisis, launching frantic search efforts and conducting thorough investigations into each disappearance. But despite their best efforts, they found themselves no closer to unraveling the mystery of the vanishing people than they had been with the missing bodies. Theories abounded as to the cause of the disappearances, ranging from the plausible to the outlandish. Some speculated that a serial kidnapper was at large, preying on unsuspecting victims under cover of darkness. Others whispered of supernatural forces at work, invoking tales of malevolent spirits and otherworldly entities lurking in the shadows. But regardless of the theories that circulated, one thing was abundantly clear: a sense of unease hung heavy in the air, casting a pall over even the most mundane of activities. People looked over their shoulders as they walked down the street, their hearts pounding in their chests at the slightest sound or movement, and it happened to me. The night was dark and silent, the air heavy with the weight of impending doom as I lay sleeping in my home in Millersville. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a sense of unease, a primal instinct warning me of impending danger. My heart raced in my chest as I scanned the darkness, searching for the source of my fear. And then I saw it for the first time, a shadowy figure lurking in the corner of my room, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light as it advanced towards me with unnatural speed and grace. Panic surged through my veins as I realized that I was face to face with something beyond the realm of the living, something twisted and malevolent beyond comprehension. In a desperate bid to defend myself, I lashed out with whatever makeshift weapon I could find, striking out at the creature with all the strength and fury I could muster. Blow after blow rained down upon it, but still it advanced, its inhuman strength undiminished by the force of my attacks. But then, in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I saw my chance. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled courage, I delivered a final, decisive blow, striking the creature with all the force I could muster. And as its lifeless body crumpled to the ground before me, I realized with a sickening sense of horror that what lay before me was not a living being at all, but a corpse animated by some unholy force beyond comprehension. In that moment, I knew that I had narrowly escaped becoming another victim of whatever malevolent presence was haunting the town of Millersville. And as I stood over the lifeless body of the creature I had slain, a chill ran down my spine at the realization that the nightmare was far from over. For if there was one undead creature stalking the streets of Millersville, there were surely others lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim their next victim in the darkness of the night. As I examined the grotesque remains of the creature that had nearly taken my life, a sense of dread washed over me at the sight of its decayed and liquefied innards. The absence of organs, the state of advanced decay, and the near-total deterioration of its brain were all baffling anomalies that defied rational explanation. In my search for answers, I delved deeper into the mysteries of the undead creature before me, scouring my knowledge of folklore, mythology, and the occult for any clues that might shed light on its true nature. But try as I might, I found no mention of creatures matching its description in the annals of myth and legend. And yet, there it lay before me, a reanimated corpse, devoid of life yet somehow still moving with a semblance of purpose and intent. It was clear that whatever force was animating these creatures defied conventional understanding, operating according to rules and principles that were beyond the realm of human comprehension. As I pondered the implications of my discovery, a chilling realization dawned on me: these creatures were not bound by the laws of nature as we knew them. They were something altogether different, something ancient and malevolent that existed beyond the boundaries of life and death. The ominous thumping outside my window sent shivers down my spine as I peered out into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. What I saw chilled me to the bone: more of the undead creatures, their twisted forms shambling through the streets with eerie purpose. But my horror reached new heights when I witnessed the unthinkable: a fresh corpse lying motionless on the ground suddenly stirred to life, rising from the cold pavement with an unnatural grace. It was a young woman, her features frozen in a grotesque parody of life as she joined the ranks of the undead. The screams of terror echoing in the distance served as a grim reminder of the chaos and devastation unfolding outside my door. It was clear that the situation had escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined, with the undead now roaming the streets in search of fresh victims to add to their ranks. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that the nightmare had only just begun. The town of Millersville was under siege by an army of the undead, and if I was to have any hope of surviving the night, I would need to confront the horrors that lurked outside and find a way to put an end to the unholy plague that threatened to consume us all. As I watched in horror from the safety of my home, the undead descended upon their latest victim with merciless efficiency, their twisted forms moving with an unnatural grace as they delivered blow after blow until she lay motionless on the cold pavement. And then, as if driven by some unseen force, the woman rose from the ground once more, her eyes vacant and devoid of life as she joined the ranks of the undead. These creatures were not driven by hunger or the desire to infect the living with some virulent disease. No, their sole purpose was far more insidious and horrifying. They sought only to spread death and destruction wherever they roamed. It was a terrifying revelation, one that sent a chill down my spine as I realized the true nature of the threat we faced. These creatures were not bound by the constraints of mortality or the laws of nature. They were harbingers of death, agents of chaos and destruction sent to unleash hell upon the world of the living. As I sat in my home, the oppressive silence of the night enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, broken only by the occasional thump of footsteps outside. I thought I had vanquished the undead creature that had dared to intrude upon my sanctuary, but as I turned to survey the room, my heart plummeted into my stomach at the sight that greeted me. There, standing before me with a malevolent glint in its lifeless eyes, was the very same creature I had thought defeated, its twisted form looming ominously in the darkness. How it had managed to sneak up on me, I could not say, but one thing was abundantly clear: the undead were far more cunning and resilient than I had ever imagined. With a guttural growl, the creature lunged towards me, its outstretched hands reaching for my throat with deadly intent. Instinct kicked in, and I reacted without hesitation, springing into action with a speed and agility born of desperation. I dodged its grasping claws with a dancer's grace, sidestepping its attack and seizing it by the shoulders with a strength born of sheer determination. With a primal roar, I hurled the creature towards the nearest window, the glass shattering into 1,000 glittering shards as its twisted form hurtled through the air. The crash was deafening, echoing through the silent night like a thunderclap and drawing the attention of more undead creatures lurking outside my home. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that my actions had only served to alert them to my presence, turning me from hunter to hunted in the blink of an eye. Without a moment's hesitation, I made a split-second decision: I would not go down without a fight. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, I leaped through the shattered window and hit the ground running, my feet pounding against the cold pavement as I raced down East Cottage Avenue with the undead hot on my heels. As I sprinted down East Cottage Avenue, my heart pounding in my chest and my breath coming in ragged gasps, I stumbled upon the lifeless body of a fallen police officer lying sprawled on the cold pavement. His uniform was torn and bloodied, his eyes staring sightlessly into the night sky, a grim testament to the horrors that had befallen the town of Millersville. But it was not his lifeless form that caught my attention, it was the glimmer of metal caught in the lamplight, the unmistakable shape of a .44 Magnum revolver lying within arm's reach of his outstretched hand. Without hesitation, I rushed to his side, my fingers closing around the cold metal of the weapon as I pulled it free from his grasp. The weight of the gun felt reassuringly familiar in my hand, its heft a comforting reminder of the power it held. I checked the chamber, my heart sinking as I realized that it was empty, the weapon devoid of ammunition. But in that moment of desperation, I knew that I could not afford to dwell on what I lacked. I needed to focus on what I had. With a steely resolve, I pushed aside the creeping tendrils of fear and doubt that threatened to cloud my mind, focusing instead on the task at hand. The undead were closing in, their twisted forms looming ever closer with each passing second, but I refused to let panic consume me. I knew that if I could reach my destination, if I could find a way to outsmart and outmaneuver the undead that pursued me, I would have all the ammunition I needed to survive. And with that thought fueling my determination, I pressed on into the night, the .44 Magnum clutched tightly in my hand. With the undead horde closing in behind me, I found myself navigating the fences and obstacles that littered my path, each one a potential barrier between me and safety. But with adrenaline coursing through my veins and survival instinct driving me forward, I pushed myself to the limits, leaping over obstacles and scaling fences with a speed and agility born of desperation. As I raced through the night, the distant wails of the undead echoing in my ears, I soon found myself standing before the local gun store, its doors locked tight against the encroaching darkness. But there was no time to waste. I needed ammunition if I had any hope of surviving the night. With a grim determination, I raised the .44 Magnum revolver in my hand and hurled it with all the strength I could muster, the weapon shattering the glass window with a deafening crash. Without hesitation, I climbed through the broken window, the shards of glass biting into my skin as I landed on the floor inside. Ignoring the pain, I quickly retrieved the .44 Magnum from the floor and scanned the shelves for ammunition. My heart soared with relief as I spotted boxes of .44 Magnum rounds, their gleaming casings a welcome sight amidst the chaos and destruction that surrounded me. I wasted no time in loading up, grabbing as many rounds as I could carry and stuffing them into my pockets and pouches. With each bullet I loaded into the chamber, a sense of resolve settled over me, driving out the fear and uncertainty that threatened to overwhelm me. But then as the cold steel of the AR-15 pressed against my temple, a chill ran down my spine at the realization that my desperate bid for survival had brought me face to face with yet another deadly threat. The man holding the gun regarded me with a steely gaze, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger as he leveled a stern accusation at me. "You know robbery and theft is a crime," he taunted, his voice laced with contempt. But I knew that there was no time for explanations or excuses, not when the undead lurked just beyond the shattered window, their twisted forms hungering for the taste of human flesh. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I stared defiantly back at the man, steeling myself for whatever fate awaited me. "Don't be stupid," I retorted, my voice dripping with urgency. "A single gunshot will bring them here." For a moment, the man hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty as he weighed his options. But then, with a determined glint in his eye, he made his decision, his finger tightening on the trigger as he prepared to end my life in a hail of gunfire. But before he could pull the trigger, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, echoing through the night like a death knell. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I knew that the undead had heard the sound of our altercation and were closing in fast. In that moment of desperation, I knew that I had only one chance to escape with my life. With lightning speed, I lunged forward, knocking the gun from the man's grasp and sending it clattering to the ground. And then, without a backward glance, I bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced into the night, leaving the man and his AR-15 behind me as I fled into the darkness, knowing that the undead were hot on my heels and that every moment counted in the fight for survival. As I sprinted away from the gun store, the unmistakable sound of gunfire rang out behind me, punctuated by the guttural snarls and groans of the undead. I dared not look back, knowing that every second I wasted increased the risk of becoming their next victim. As the sound of rifle fire faded into the distance, I knew that the man's fate had likely been sealed by the relentless onslaught of the undead. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of life in the face of such overwhelming odds, a reminder that even the strongest and bravest among us could fall victim to the relentless march of the undead. But I dared not dwell on the grim fate of the man in the gun store, not when my own survival hung in the balance. With a renewed sense of urgency, I pressed on into the night, my feet pounding against the pavement as I raced towards whatever sanctuary awaited me in the darkness. And as I disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the chaos and carnage of the gun store, I knew that a single rifle round was loud enough to reverberate throughout the entire town. I seized upon the opportunity to make my way to the local parking garage, knowing that it would provide the perfect vantage point from which to survey the surrounding area and locate a vehicle to aid in my escape. As I approached the parking garage, my heart raced with anticipation, my footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness of the night. I scanned the area for any sign of movement, my senses on high alert for any lurking threats that might lie in wait. But to my relief, the area appeared to be deserted, the undead seemingly distracted by the commotion at the gun store. With a sense of cautious optimism, I hurried towards the entrance of the parking garage, my eyes scanning the rows of vehicles for any sign of a suitable escape route. And then, at last, I spotted it, a sleek black SUV parked near the entrance, its engine idling softly in the night. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, I made a beeline for the vehicle, my footsteps quickening with each passing moment as I closed the distance between myself and freedom. As I reached the SUV, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the undead closing in on me with ravenous hunger in their eyes. But to my relief, there was no sign of pursuit. the distant sounds of gunfire fading into the background as I climbed behind the wheel, my hands trembling with a mix of anticipation and nerves. I knew that time was of the essence. With the undead potentially lurking around every corner, I needed to act quickly if I was to make my escape from Millersville before it was too late. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I reached under the dashboard, my fingers fumbling with the wires as I searched for the ignition. With each passing moment, the tension in the air grew thicker, the distant sounds of gunfire a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the safety of the vehicle. And then, with a sense of relief bordering on elation, I felt the ignition switch click into place beneath my fingertips, the engine roaring to life with a satisfying purr. With a silent prayer of thanks, I shifted into gear and eased the SUV out of its parking space, my eyes scanning the surrounding area for any sign of danger as I navigated through the deserted streets of Millersville. The headlights cut through the darkness like twin beacons of hope, illuminating the path ahead as I made my way towards the town's outskirts. With each passing mile, the tension in my shoulders began to ease, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism as I put more distance between myself and the undead-infested streets of Millersville. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I knew that the danger was far from over. The road ahead stretched out before me like an uncertain promise, its twists and turns shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. But I refused to let fear dictate my actions, not when survival hung in the balance. As I weighed my options for potential safe havens amidst the chaos of the undead-infested world, my mind raced with the possibilities and limitations of each town within reach. While Lancaster, with its larger population and police presence, seemed like a logical choice at first glance, the sheer scale of the city made it a likely target for overrun and chaos. With countless streets to navigate and an overwhelming number of potential threats, I knew that Lancaster would be a high-risk gamble that could easily spell disaster. Holtwood, on the other hand, offered the appeal of low population density, but its lack of infrastructure made it an impractical choice for long-term survival. Without access to reliable food, water, and shelter, I would be left vulnerable to the elements and ill-equipped to fend off the relentless onslaught of the undead. Mountville presented another tempting option, with its plentiful resources and strategic location, but its distance from my current location posed a significant challenge. The journey would be long and treacherous, fraught with danger at every turn, and I couldn't afford to waste precious time and energy on a risky gamble that might ultimately lead to failure. And then there was Columbia, a town nestled along the banks of the Susquehanna River, its proximity to water offering the promise of escape and potential salvation. With its relatively smaller population and strategic location, Columbia seemed like the best option for a weary survivor seeking refuge from the horrors of the outside world. With a sense of grim determination, I set my sights on Columbia. As I drove towards Columbia, my mind drifted back to the long and brutal winter that had gripped the region in its icy embrace for 4 long months. It was a time of hardship and struggle, with the relentless snow and biting cold testing the resilience of the residents of Millersville and beyond. During those bitter winter months, we had been more vulnerable than ever before. The snowdrifts piled high, blocking roads and trapping us in our homes, while the biting wind howled outside, threatening to freeze us to the bone. With resources dwindling and supplies running low, we had struggled to survive in the face of overwhelming odds, each day bringing with it new challenges and dangers. And yet, amidst the harsh conditions and bitter cold, there had been no sign of the undead. No shambling creatures lurking in the snow-covered streets, no whispers of horror echoing through the frozen air. It was as if the winter had held them at bay, keeping them at bay with its icy grip. But now, as the snow melted away and the thaw began to set in, the signs of the undead had begun to appear with alarming frequency. It was a chilling realization, one that filled me with a sense of dread and unease. What had changed? What had caused these monsters to emerge from the shadows now, after months of silence and slumber? As I pondered the question, a troubling thought began to form in the back of my mind. Had the thaw somehow awakened the undead from their icy slumber, bringing them back to life with a hunger for death and destruction? It seemed like the only logical explanation, the only answer that made sense in the face of the mounting evidence. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I knew that the truth was far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The thaw had unleashed a nightmare upon the world, unleashing the undead upon an unsuspecting populace and plunging us into a battle for survival unlike any we had ever faced before. As I continued to drive towards Columbia, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in my mind, forming a chilling picture of the horrors that had been unleashed upon the world. The words of my family, steeped in the traditions of Catholicism, echoed in my thoughts, their ominous warning taking on new significance in the face of the undead menace that now roamed the earth. According to the teachings of my family's faith, it was said that when hell reached its capacity, when the souls of the damned outnumbered the living, the gates of hell would freeze over, locking the dead out. It was a grim prophecy, one that had been passed down through the generations as a cautionary tale of the consequences of sin and damnation. And now, as I pondered the events that had unfolded in the wake of the thaw, it seemed that this ancient prophecy had come to pass in the most literal sense. Hell, it seemed, had reached its capacity, its fiery depths overflowing with the souls of the damned. And with the onset of the thaw, the gates of hell had frozen over, locking the dead out and allowing them to walk the earth once more. It was a terrifying realization, one that filled me with a sense of dread and unease. For if hell had indeed frozen over, then it meant that the undead were no longer bound by the laws of nature or the constraints of mortality. They were free to roam the earth at will, spreading death and destruction wherever they went, with no hope of salvation or redemption in sight. As I approached the border of Columbia, the sound of gunfire echoed through the night, drawing my attention to the docks where a desperate battle was unfolding. From a distance, I could see rows of small fishing craft bobbing in the water, along with a few larger Coast Guard boats left over from the winter before. But what caught my eye most were the figures of police officers, Coast Guard personnel, and National Guard soldiers mixed together in a desperate defense against the relentless onslaught of the undead. Their weapons blazed in the darkness, muzzle flashes illuminating the night as they fought tooth and nail to hold the line against the waves of undead that crashed against them. For a moment, I hesitated, torn between the desire to lend my aid to the defenders and the instinctual urge to preserve my own safety. The odds were overwhelming, the undead seemingly endless in number, and I knew that rushing headlong into the fray would be a fool's errand. And so, with a heavy heart, I hung back for the time being, watching from a safe distance as the defenders battled bravely against the encroaching horde. Each shot fired, each blow struck, was a testament to their courage and determination in the face of unimaginable odds. But even as I watched, a sense of guilt gnawed at my conscience, knowing that I could not stand idly by while others fought and died to protect their home and loved ones. And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer for courage, I steeled myself for the inevitable moment when I would join the fray, knowing that the fight for survival was far from over and that the fate of Colombia and perhaps the world itself hung in the balance. With a primal scream of defiance echoing in the night, I threw caution to the wind and slammed the car into full throttle, the engine roaring to life as I barreled towards the oncoming horde of undead with reckless abandon. With every ounce of strength and determination I possessed, I put pedal to the metal, hurtling towards the line of defenders with a single-minded focus on breaking through the ranks of the undead and joining the fray. The impact of the collision sent shockwaves reverberating through the car as I plowed through the mass of writhing bodies, the sickening thud of flesh meeting metal mingling with the cacophony of screams and groans that filled the air. But still, the undead pressed on, their twisted forms clawing and gnashing at the car with an unrelenting fury that seemed to defy reason. As the car slowed to a crawl, and then finally ground to a halt amidst the sea of bodies, I knew that I could go no further. With a quick glance around to ensure that I was not injured, I leaped out of the car, my .44 Magnum drawn and ready for action as I joined the defenders in their desperate stand against the encroaching horde. With each shot fired, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, my senses heightened to a razor-sharp edge as I fought side by side with the others to hold the line against the relentless onslaught of the undead. Together, we stood as a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, our weapons blazing in the night as we refused to yield an inch to the forces of darkness that threatened to consume us all. As I surveyed the chaos unfolding around me, my eyes fell upon the spare gas can lying nearby, a glimmer of inspiration sparking within me. With a quick glance back towards the line of defenders, I could see that the boat still needed time to prepare for departure, and every precious second counted in our battle against the encroaching horde. Without hesitation, I seized upon the opportunity before me, snatching up the gas can with a sense of grim determination. As I turned towards the car I had used as a makeshift battering ram moments before, I could see the telltale signs of fuel and oil leaking from the vehicle, pooling on the ground in a slick puddle of flammable liquid. With a steady hand and a prayer on my lips, I hurled the full gas can onto the puddle of gas and oil, watching as it landed with a resounding thud and splashed liquid in all directions. In an instant, the air was filled with the acrid scent of gasoline, mingling with the stench of death and decay that hung heavy in the night air. Sensing the danger, the others wasted no time in opening fire on the spot, their weapons blazing as they unleashed a torrent of bullets into the volatile mixture below. And then, in a flash of heat and light, a massive flame erupted from the ground, engulfing the area in a micro-inferno that crackled and roared with deadly intensity. For a moment, the undead recoiled in terror, their twisted forms illuminated by the flickering flames as they stumbled backwards in confusion. And in that moment of hesitation, we seized upon the opportunity to regroup and fortify our defenses, knowing that the flames would buy us the precious time we needed to prepare for the next wave of the undead onslaught. As the fire raged on, casting long shadows against the night sky, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. Though the battle was far from over, we had bought ourselves a reprieve, a brief respite in our desperate struggle for survival against the forces of darkness that threatened to consume us all. And with renewed determination burning bright in our hearts, we stood ready to face whatever horrors the night might bring, united in our resolve to defend our home and loved ones to the very end. As the flames continued to dance and flicker behind us, casting long shadows across the docks, the defenders wasted no time in packing up their gear and making their way towards the waiting boats. With grim determination etched on their faces, they moved with purpose and efficiency, loading supplies and weaponry onto the vessels as they prepared for departure. I followed suit, lending a hand wherever I could, my movements quick and decisive as I helped to secure the last of the equipment on board. With each passing moment, the sense of urgency grew more palpable, the distant sounds of the undead drawing nearer with every passing second. Finally, as the last of the supplies were stowed away and the engines of the boats roared to life, I found myself ushered aboard the lead ship, a sense of gratitude and relief washing over me as I stepped onto the deck. The captain, a weathered veteran with a steely gaze and a firm handshake, greeted me with a nod of acknowledgement, his voice hoarse from shouting commands in the heat of battle. "Thank you for your help back there," he said, his tone sincere as he clasped my hand in his own. "We wouldn't have made it out without you." I nodded in return, a sense of pride swelling within me at the recognition of my efforts. "Just doing what needed to be done," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos that still raged around us. And then, as the captain turned to me with a curious expression, he asked the question that had been looming in the back of my mind since the nightmare began. "What's your name?" he inquired, his eyes searching mine for an answer. For a moment, I hesitated, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders as I grappled with the enormity of the situation. The world we knew was gone, consumed by the relentless tide of darkness that now threatened to engulf us all. And so, with a sense of resolve burning bright within me, I made a decision. A decision to leave behind the name I had been given at birth, and instead embrace a new identity, a name that would serve as a beacon of hope and defiance in the face of despair. "My name is Johnny Vanjik," I declared, my voice ringing out with a sense of determination that surprised even me. "And I'll do whatever it takes to ensure that we survive this nightmare." As the words left my lips, I could feel a sense of purpose coursing through my veins, driving me forward with renewed resolve. For in the midst of darkness, there was still light. And as long as there was breath in my lungs, I would fight to protect that light with every ounce of strength I possessed. As the captain shared our destination with me, a sense of relief washed over me knowing that we were headed towards safety and the possibility of reinforcements. 3 Mile Island, a name that once carried the weight of disaster, now offered hope in the form of a large army camp established during the long winter. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but with the captain's assurance and the prospect of finding allies at the camp, my spirits lifted. The boat surged forward, slicing through the dark waters of the Susquehanna River with purposeful determination. As we traveled, the night sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn, casting a soft glow over the water and illuminating our path forward. The distant sounds of gunfire and screams faded into the background, replaced by the steady hum of the boat's engines and the rhythmic lapping of waves against its hull. With each passing mile, anticipation grew within me, mingled with a sense of apprehension at what lay ahead. Would the army camp still stand strong, or had it too fallen victim to the relentless onslaught of the undead? Only time would tell. But for now, as we sailed towards our destination, I allowed myself to hope for safety, for sanctuary, and for the chance to join forces with others who were fighting to reclaim our world from the grip of darkness. And with that hope burning bright within me, I turned my gaze towards the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges awaited us at 3 Mile Island and beyond. For in a world consumed by chaos and despair, hope was the greatest weapon we had, and I was determined to wield it with all the strength and courage I could muster. As our boat approached 3 Mile Island, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The sprawling army camp came into view, a beacon of safety amidst the chaos that had consumed the world. Tall fences lined with barbed wire surrounded the perimeter, watchtowers standing sentinel against the encroaching darkness. The camp bustled with activity, soldiers moving with purpose as they went about their duties, their faces set in grim determination. Barracks and tents dotted the landscape, forming a makeshift city within the confines of the island, a testament to the resilience of humanity in the face of adversity. As we drew nearer, I could see armed guards stationed at the entrance, their weapons at the ready as they scrutinized our approach. But as they recognized the markings of our boat and the weary faces of its passengers, their expressions softened, and a sense of relief washed over them. With a sense of relief and gratitude, we docked the boat and disembarked onto the solid ground of 3 Mile Island. The air was thick with tension, but also with the promise of safety and sanctuary that the camp represented. As I looked around at the faces of my fellow survivors, I could see a glimmer of hope in their eyes, a belief that perhaps, against all odds, we might yet find a way to overcome the horrors that had befallen us and rebuild a world worth living in. And with that thought echoing in my mind, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For in the army camp on 3 Mile Island, I knew that we had found not just a place of safety, but a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. And with that hope to guide us, I knew that anything was possible. As I walked through the camp, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had lost and everything we had yet to endure, I couldn't help but be struck by the sight of the refugees who had found sanctuary within its walls. Men, women, and children of all ages and backgrounds huddled together in makeshift shelters, their faces etched with weariness and fear, but also with a glimmer of hope for a better tomorrow. Some sat huddled around small fires, their hands outstretched to the warmth as they shared stories of the lives they had left behind and the journey that had brought them to this place of safety. Others moved about with a sense of purpose, tending to the needs of their fellow survivors and doing whatever they could to lend a helping hand in the face of adversity. Despite the hardships they had endured and the uncertainty that lay ahead, there was a resilience in their spirit that spoke volumes about the strength of the human heart. They had faced unimaginable challenges and overcome impossible odds, and yet here they were, still standing, still fighting, still clinging to the hope that tomorrow would be better than today. As I passed by, I offered a nod of acknowledgement and a word of encouragement to those I encountered, knowing that in times like these, even the smallest gestures of kindness could make all the difference. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, I took solace in the knowledge that we were not alone, that together, united in purpose and resolve, we would find a way to persevere and rebuild in the face of destruction. As I sat beneath the shade of the trees, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun, I couldn't help but find myself lost in thought, my mind wandering to the endless possibilities of this new world that lay stretched out before me. Above, the sky stretched out in a vast expanse of blue, dotted with fluffy clouds that drifted lazily on the gentle breeze. Birds chirped in the branches overhead, their songs a comforting melody that seemed to speak of hope and renewal. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, I knew that danger lurked around every corner, waiting to pounce on the unwary and the unprepared. The undead still roamed the land, their hunger for death and destruction undiminished by the light of day. And beyond them, who knew what other horrors awaited in the shadows, lurking just out of sight, ready to strike when least expected. And yet, despite the dangers that lay ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement stirring within me, a sense of adventure that called out to me from the depths of my soul. For in this new world, anything was possible. New lands to explore, new allies to meet, and new challenges to overcome all lay waiting for those brave enough to seek them out. As I gazed up at the endless expanse of sky above, I made a silent vow to myself to embrace this new world with open arms, to face whatever challenges it might throw my way with courage and determination, and to never lose sight of the hope that burned bright within me. For in the end, it was hope that would guide us through the darkness, that would light our path through the unknown, and that would lead us towards a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow filled with promise and possibility, where anything was possible for those willing to reach out and seize it with both hands. And as I sat beneath the trees, bathed in the warmth of the morning sun, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I was ready to face it head on, with hope in my heart and a sense of adventure in my soul. End audio log.